Welcome everyone. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the JustFlight PA-28 Warrior 2, and kind of going over a little bit about how to fly it, as well as kind of the individual model quirks. One thing I will say is, since I did my little impressions video, they did release an update that fixed some of the things that came up in that video, so we're definitely going to be able to look forward to that as well. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first things first is I managed to book around online, and somebody put together this pretty nice little checklist. It's definitely designed for a specific version of this plane. It is not necessarily this specific airplane, so we're just going to kind of have to work with what we have here. So as usual, the first thing is we'd want to make sure we do a complete pre-flight inspection of the aircraft. The pre-flight in this one is nice and fun. Basically, you climb over here, go around, lift up the ailerons, you check the fuel underneath, you kind of analyze everything on the different pieces, get back inside the plane, kind of go around all the different buttons, make sure everything is really, really hot. We got real cold weather today. Of course, we can activate some CFI AC here by opening up the door. That's so much better now. It would still be incredibly hot inside this airplane. It is like a little greenhouse. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to get this thing started. First things first, with this particular simulated version, I like to come over here and kind of make sure everything looks okay. Like I can see I have plenty of oil quantity. I have plenty of battery juice here. You can come in here and set all these warnings if you want. You can enable your co-pilot if you'd like. She's just kind of chilling there with little headphones on. How you doing? Coming over this side, we can do auto fuel selector and manual. If you want to be more authentic, you can put this to the manual mode. This simply means that every half an hour, you got to kind of reach down here and slap this throttle or the little fuel selector where it needs to go. I like leaving this on auto just for my own sanity. For those of you practicing for the real plane, make sure you leave this off. GPS-wise, if you want to do the GTN 750, you just drop that in the folder, and basically the option will come up here. For us today, we're going to go ahead and go with the GNS Dual. Actually, we'll just do the GNS 530. Keep it nice and simple today. And the state saving, of course, is pretty cool. This basically makes sure that the airplane, whatever we leave it as, will stay that way. And then we have a choice between the directional indicator, which is right here, or if we want to, we can actually switch this to an HSI. An HSI is a really nice, precise instrument, but, let's go old school and we'll do it with a directional indicator. Over here, you can turn the yokes on and off, but you can do that as well. I always like to come down, shut off all this stuff that we don't need. You can put the wheel pants on if you want. It's not really critical. Again, this is more a simulator side thing than anything. And I'll go ahead and slap down the cabin door and lock everything out there just to make sure we're looking good. Okay, everything's looking fine. Now we're going to leave the wheel fairings again. That's these little funky things on the edge of the wheel. They give us a little tiny bit more speed. Once I'm happy with this, I just boop, get rid of it. And you can actually get rid of it completely by clicking that switch right there. All right, let's go ahead and now work our way through our list here. So we're going to go down. We're going to assume all of our checks went pretty well here. Swing down this way real quick. Left wing, right wing. Before start, Hobbs time. We record. Charts available. Seats adjusted and locked. Radio and electronics are off. Now, this aircraft is nice because the electronics don't come on until you flip the switch down here, so you don't have to worry about it. We're going to set our brakes. In the real world, I hate the parking brake. Whenever you do the parking brake, there's a good chance you forget to disengage the parking brake. So what I'll usually do is I'll just hold the brakes regular. But again, if you want to set the parking brake, knock yourself out. Doesn't matter. I'm just holding on the brakes the old-fashioned way. Carburetor heat's going to be in off position, which it is. We're going to make our mixture to the full rich position, which it is. We're going to go ahead and make sure everything else is on this side. We're going to go mixture full rich. Master switch, which is the red one. We're going to flip that to the on position. The fuel pump is going to come onto the on position. We're going to make sure anti-collision light is turned on as well. And normally you stick your head out the window and yell clear. But one of the things you'll notice is in our little list here, it did not mention the fact what fuel tank we're supposed to be on right now. So I'm actually going to come swing down here and make sure this is set up correctly. All right, so that's good to go. Before taxi, check, 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 check. We're going to come up 3 times. All right, we're going to prime it. Priming this aircraft's a little tricky. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to roll the mouse wheel to unlock it to the left, towards you. Then you click on it and you push it in. Click, 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 click. And that's a 3 blast of prime there. We're going to lock it. Always lock your primer. You don't want that thing wandering out and causing engine fires and all that other usual good stuff here. So now that the aircraft is nice and set to the prime position, now it's time to go ahead and get this going. We stick our head out the window and yell the word clear prop. We always look around and make sure there's nobody who's going to get blasted here. In this case, I think it's going to be pretty safe. So we're just going to come down here and crank away. Nice. Gotta love that. As soon as we get going, though, we want to get ourselves at about 1,000 RPM, which is going to be pretty nice. One thing that I always do is I always like to lean things a little bit to keep the lead out of the spark plugs. That is simulated in this particular airplane, so it's one of those things you have to kind of keep an eye out for. All right, oil pressure. We're going to make sure everything is in the green here. Apparently, they forgot to put fuel inside of airplane. What is the deal with that? I hate how Flight Simulator does not remember. All right, we are in the green. Oil pressure's in the green. Oil pressure's in the... Okay, looks good. Looks good, looks good, looks good. I'm going to go ahead and pop over here. I'm going to flip that on. Make sure that's all set to go. Intercom emergency. Actually, we don't even need it. I'm not even going to bother with it. Okay, flaps are going to come up. Normally, you set this up. Lean for taxi. Fuel pump are going to come off. And you're just going to check to make sure the pressure doesn't drop off the bottom, which it won't. All right, flap stop. Avionics on. Avionics on this one is really simple. You come over here and click that switch. That's it. Avionics on. Now, if you want to use some of your other avionics, you actually have to come over here and actually click it. For example, if we have our DME down here, if we want to be using our DME for our particular flight, we can go ahead and get that out of the way for now. And we can set all these particular things in. We've got our GPS, which preloaded the flight plan right off of, like I said, inside of Flight Sim itself, so I don't have to stress too much. One thing you do got to watch out for is when you first start this, you got to make sure you switch your CDI so that it agrees with whatever you're using. In this case, you can do navigation or you can do GPS. So in this case, I'll go with GPS. When you do that, though, one thing you want to look out for is you want to look at your DTK, and it's a good idea to take whatever that value is and put it into here. That's going to save your sanity later on when you're trying to figure out which way you need to turn the plane if you're using a different technique here. So I'm just going to set that right up to tree 10. So now the desired track agrees this because this won't move on its own. If you have the HSI, you have to kind of go through the same process. Speaking of HSI, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go check to make sure the HSI is pointing in the right direction. Looks like we have, this would be at 100 degrees. This would be about 114. We're pointing at 116, so it's not too bad here. I'm not going to stress. The other thing I always like to do is I like to take my little heading indicator down here, and I like to point it at our current runway. Speaking of current runway, let's see what we got here.
Kilo Bravo India Delta automated weather observation 1600 Zulu. Wind 075 at 8.
075 at 8, so the wind is coming out of this direction, so it's going to be that runway today.
Few clouds at 4,300 feet. Few clouds at 12,000.
This is live weather, by the way, if you were curious.
Temperature 22C2.
Oh, God, that's warm.
C altimeter 3014.
201.
Kilo Bravo India Delta automated.
All right, so they're not going to tell us what runway to use here. We have to understand what runway to use. So if I pop my head out here real quick, don't forget that a runway, we have a runway 10 in that direction. Obviously, if you take tree 6 minus 10, you're going to get the runway that's taking in the other direction. If you want to think about it another way, we're basically facing what the runway heading is going to be, and obviously the other one's going to be our 28. So we're going to go ahead and get our taxi going here. Nothing too scary with this particular airplane. One trickiness, though, of course, we are sitting here on grass, so when we do taxi, we want to lift that stabilator up nice to keep that front wheel from kind of digging into the ground here. We're going to go do all of our run-up stuff when we get a little bit closer. Lift that nose up, and let's just do the little rumblies over here. I appreciate the fact there's a G91 at this airport. It couldn't actually get into this airport, but I appreciate the concept. All right, we're back onto the tarmac, and we just kind of use our feet. Now, on a Piper, you have a very different system as far as nose wheel steering goes. It tends to be a little bit trickier. You really have to push that pedal forward to get it to go. Cessna's got their crazy proprietary stuff. All right, I'm just going to make our way over to the little run-up zone here. We're just going to make sure everything is working properly. We definitely don't want to be taking this plane up into the air without checking it. We actually had a thing a couple weeks ago where one of the magnetos actually did go bad, and they weren't able to determine it. It was like when they fired the whole thing up, they had a massive power drain. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my airplane as much into the wind as I possibly can. The real one, you can basically just hold on the left pedal and just kind of do a little dance on it. Kind of hard to do that here, but I'm making the best I can with it. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and set that. Let's go do our little run-up here. So I'll go bring up the little checklist again so you can kind of follow along here. Before taxi, that looks good. Let's see here. Taxi, right and left, in turn chord, run up. All right, let's do it to it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and run ourselves up to 2,000 on the rev scale. Doesn't take much. The whole plane starts shaking back and forth like this. A little more. And right there. Perfect. So that's 2,000 RPM. We're going to go ahead and turn on our fuel pump. Don't forget to set your mixture to fuel rich. Fuel pump comes on. You want to make sure that that's working correctly. We're going to go ahead and switch the tank to make sure both tanks are working properly. No, that sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good. Kill this one. Now we're going to go ahead and check our magnetos. We're just going to click it to the left, and we're going to see how much of a drop we get. The RPM's not bad. We'll check the other one. About 75. Not bad at all. That's pretty typical. And now we're going to go ahead and pull the throttle all the way back. Engine should keep running, and if it does, we're now ready to go. Kick the thing back in, and we are ready for our takeoff. Nice. All right, so we're just going to go before our takeoff checklist. One thing we do is we check our circuit breakers. The circuit breakers actually work. So if, for example, I came over here, shut this one off, no anti-collision light. You know, you can actually set that, which I think is a nice touch. Flight instruments, like I said, we want to check to make sure they're setting, heading, everything agrees, which it does. It does. We're going to make sure our communication radio is set. Again, we're not going to worry about that today. Pitot heat, it's always a good idea to go ahead and test that as well. How do we know it works? If you turn the switch on, you should have an electrical load. And you can see when we turn it on, we get a little bit of a load, which means the pitot heat, at least there's electricity going to it. It's a good sign. We're going to make sure our flaps are set. No flaps for today's takeoff. We're going to make sure seatbelts are good, doors and window, briefing, air conditioner, autopilot, tower. Obviously, we want to get permission here. One thing I will do, though, is I'll actually set it to the correct transponder code here. We're going to go to 1200. It's VFR in the United States. Oh, I wouldn't push that button. That's a bad combination. NOMA would say, uh-oh, we can't actually operate anywhere near a main air traffic control tower. Yikes. Oh, well, we'll deal with what we got. Let's get rolling. All right, run up to the runway, check the approach. We have real-world weather and traffic on today, so I don't see anybody coming. This would be a very popular day to come here, so I'm sure in the real world there's plenty of airplanes queuing up here. So we like to do lights, camera, action. Basically, all we're going to do is we're going to make sure the lights are set correctly, which they are. We're going to make sure our camera is ready to go, which is just going to be our transponder. And action, fuel pump, we're going to make sure mixture control is all the way up. Line ourselves up the runway, full power. Weehaw! Of course, when you do this, it's like pressure forms in your ear almost instantaneously. It's the coolest thing. We're going to lift the nose up at 55 knots. There's 55 knots. We're going to go ahead and give it a big tug. This aircraft takes a lot of force to get airborne, and we are airborne, just like that. Our best climb speed is going to be about 79 knots. If we want to use something that high of a speed, we can also stand under tail here and go about 63 if we wanted to, but 75 is going to be a little more comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and swing us over to the left a little bit here. And we're looking really good. 80 knots is a little more comfortable. You're going to get a little bit better cooling for the engine. And we're basically going to sit here at full throttle for our entire climb here because we don't need to go too crazy here. Nice thing is we're nice and lightly loaded, so it's not going to be too insane of a flight here. Now remember how I said set up your HSI early? Now I know if I head at about 300 degrees, I'll be right on course without even being able to see it on the GPS yet. Get a good look at Block Island here. This is a pretty neat little place. It's got like a Cliffs of Dover's thing going around on the outside, but I don't think we're going to see that. There we go. Tree 00 is going to be our initial little heading. And we're basically going to power vertically here in order to get ourselves above this water because this is Long Island Sound and we want to be careful. A little bit of trim. Trim on this aircraft is it's interesting because you have both roll trim as well as pitch trim, which is not roll trim, I'm sorry. You have rudder trim, which is really awesome. But it is a very quick to trim plane. Bring that nose up, we'll look about 7.5 degrees. That looks pretty good right there. Remember, we don't have any autopilot for the purposes of pitch, but we do have an autopilot that can actually connect to things and keep us going where we need to go. I'm going to go ahead and zoom my view out just a little bit. Come down to my automatic pilot, switch it on, and I'm going to press the navigation button. What this is going to do is going to bring us over to our selected course. Remember, this is not going to work unless you set this part up correctly. This does not work. You're kind of busted here. But remember, you're still responsible, not responsibility. It is your responsibility to make sure that you maintain the correct pitch and all that other good stuff. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now we're getting ourselves a little tiny bit of altitude, so I'm not going to panic too much here. All right, we're not going to go up too high today. Like you can see from our general heading, we're heading roughly in the westerly direction. West means an even altitude, so we're going to go up to 4,500 feet. Again, keep it under VFR. This is a very short flight, so I'm not too stressed about it. Of course, flying over water, normally what you would do is after takeoff, you want to go ahead and kind of circle this island a little bit to get a little bit of ground underneath you before you decide to start making your way back down. Performance of this aircraft is great. It also happens to be excellent weather. Like I said, the visibility in the real world probably be to about here, but I'll take what I can get. Looking over in the distance, I can see some big puffy cumulus clouds. It means we're probably going to get some rain this afternoon, but I'm not stressing. I'm not stressing about it too much. It's not anything that's going to affect us. Probably bring the nose up just a teeny tiny bit more. Now, if you really want to make yourself insane, you can actually switch this over to the other GPS type while you're flying. So you can use one GPS type to program the other GPS type if you want. And again, I just think that's a great touch. All right, 3,500 feet. And we'll see you at top of climb. All right, we're just touching 4,500 feet. So when you use the elevator in this airplane, you really have to push. You can't just be like, gentle like you can on the 172. You really got to jam on it. Once you kind of get it roughly where you want, I always like the aircraft to accelerate a little tiny bit before we actually start setting up our cruise settings and all that good stuff. This is where Microsoft's lack of precision with the trim will make you slightly insane. It's one of those things I'm like, did you actually try it before you've tried it? No, it's just one of those things. All right, we're going to go ahead and reduce power for our cruise here. We're going to go down to 2,500 RPM. That's a pretty safe power setting depending on what you're doing. And then we'll go ahead and start getting everything set up as far as leaning for our mixture. Now, setting the mixture on this aircraft is pretty easy to do. You can have Microsoft do it, or you can kind of do it yourself. It doesn't make one difference one bay or the other. The big thing is you do need to actually set your mixture up on this aircraft. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this instrument here. We're going to look at this handle here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the mixture, and we should expect that this needle is going to slowly go to the right, and this RPM is going to slowly start coming up. That simply means that our air-fuel mixture is a little bit better. can see the needle slowly coming up. Now, the thing I find interesting here is I put this out pretty far. This is at 75% right now, and you can see we've got just a little bit increase in power. So I'm going to pull this out a little bit. The real plane, the engine starts going, and that's literally what it sounds like, by the way. And that tells you you've probably done enough leaning for today. A couple notches, and we're looking for the drop in engine power. See how we're almost up to, we've gained quite a few RPMs here. Yep. See how the exhaust gas temperature started going the other way? That means we've gone past peak. Give it just a little bit more. We're going to wait for this needle to go ahead and start going back the other way. Perfect. So now we have exactly set it the way that they would tell us to do it inside the manual. Nose over just a little bit there. And of course, if you want to, you can always mash the button on the keyboard or whatever you bound it to automatically do that. But watch what happens when you let Microsoft do it. We were actually pretty close, which I think is that's to our credit. All right, we're just about to our destination now, so we're going to get set up for an approach. Now, in this aircraft, we have a bunch of different ways we can approach. We can do visual approach, which we can definitely get away with today's visibility. We could also do an instrument approach, so we'll go through that real quickly just to kind of walk you through for those of you who want to use this as an instrument airplane. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to pop over here. We're going to press the proc button. We're going to select our approach, and then you simply select the approach that you want. Remember, the wind is coming mostly out of the east today. So we're going to stick with ILS 5. I'm just going to come on down here. Pick a transition. HTO is actually better. And we're just going to go ahead and activate that right away. Shut off the proc button. And now if I zoom out a teeny tiny bit, you'll notice that it's actually generated our approach that we're going to be using here. So now if you wanted to fly this approach by hand, you certainly can. And basically what's going to happen is you're going to get all the data from here unless you have HSI selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and flip on my frequencies here. I've already got it on the correct one. I can actually push this button if I wanted to swap it, but that's our ILS frequency. And we're just going to start making our way down. Now this aircraft is a little different than a lot of the Cessnas in that when you reduce the power, you don't have to worry as much about the carburetor heat as you probably thought you would. This whole green arc here is basically the safe operating range for this aircraft, and it's pretty tough to get ice in it. It's not to say you won't get ice in it. It's tough. So what I usually do is I knock about 200 RPM off of what my current RPM is, and I just let the aircraft kind of come down on its own. You don't have to be too aggressive with it in order to kind of bring it down. And you'll see that it'll just start to stabilize. If it starts to kind of get away from you, you can always just nudge that elevator down just a tiny bit. Again, you're going about 500 feet per minute. Basically, you give yourself 3 miles or so per 1,000 feet. If you're looking for like a general rule of thumb as far as when you need to start your descent downwards, it seems to work okay. Since our current destination is 10 miles away, that would be 3,000 feet descent, which is, you want to give yourself a little bit more buffer than that if you're doing 500 feet per minute. But at least it gives you a rough rule of thumb to operate on. We'll see you on the approach. All right, we're all queued up and ready for our little approach here. Well, we swapped over to a visible. There's our runway right off there in the distance. A couple quick notes on the approach for this one is the flaps in this aircraft are very, very small. So when you do deploy them, even if you go all 40 degrees of flaps on this particular thing, it's not necessarily going to slow you down as much as you think it will. It'll definitely make it a little bumpy if it's a kind of a crazy landing. Our approach speed for this aircraft, if we go pop over to our handy-dandy little guide here, if we come down to is about 63 knots, which is pretty slow. I actually recommend going closer to 70. It's going to give you just a little bit more control in your approach. But again, do what works for you. So we've paused ourselves here for the purposes of just kind of showing what this is going to look like. If you're looking for a particular RPM, the magical RPM, as I've said before, is about 1,700. So we're going to go ahead and pop up that flap lever. Again, this is just a handle. It's like a car handbrake. Not hard to pull at all, by the way, if you're very, very surprisingly. We'll grab ourselves 2 notches of flap, so go ahead and unpause. Now, the nose of the airplane is going to dive, so get ready on your trim. All right, come down here and get myself about 1,700 RPM, which is about right there. A lot of nose up. And we are on our approach. Again, judicious use of trim here should get you right around 70 knots. If it's a very, very calm wind day and you want to land extremely short distances, feel free to pop in that flaps 40. Go ahead and do that right now because it's pretty calm. Here we are. As soon as you do that, the whole plane's going to come whoa on you. And now it becomes much, much, much easier to achieve that 63 knots. Now, our landing today, like I said, we've got a bit of a crosswind going on, so it's going to make things a little bit more exciting for us. So I'm going to go ahead and push the right nose forward, just a little bit of a crab angle here. And our approach speed is actually perfect. Because we put down all the flaps, you can see we're actually starting to get a little slow. So I'm actually going to let the nose of the plane come down just a little bit here, and that should be able to line us a little bit back up. There's our 70 knots. Perfect. Pull the nose up a little bit more, and you can see now we're fairly well aligned. The light just changed. Bummer. There's one red. We want 2 reds, 2 whites. And like I said, about 70 knots is a little bit more controllable. But again, fly the plane the way that's going to make most sense for the conditions. throttle out just a little bit, and I'm just going to pull the nose up just a little. I know it seems like we're a little high. Looks pretty good. A little bit more right foot. And then we'll switch from a crab to a wing low. So I'm going to go ahead and tip my left foot forward. And I'm going to go ahead and tip my ailerons to keep me lined up with the runway here. Down to about 63. I'm going to get a little bit more speed here. There we are. Pretty lined up. We're just going to aim up for the big number 5 there. You can see how strong that crosswind is. There we go. Over the runway, we're just going to play a fun little dance. You need a lot of rudder on this one, and we are down. Again, make sure you maintain positive control of the plane until you come to a complete stop. And that's basically all there is to flying this aircraft. Not too complicated. Make sure you keep an eye on the mixture. Again, you don't want to be landing it, like rare mixture or anything along those lines. So you can see we got that all sorted out and things along those lines. And obviously, just be kind of careful with it because even though you've got the really, really nice shocks, you can find yourself a little bit lower than you expected. Let's go ahead and take a look at our little performance here. We can hit this one. Let me pop the screen up real quick. And it'll actually burn fuel and burn oil and everything. And just make sure it's something you check when you're doing your normal work here so that you can keep that in later. Other than that, enjoy.